Tania Jahshan, it is so nice to have you here.
So happy to be here too, Jenny.
You're one of those people that the moment I met, I was like, you need to be on this show.
You did that. I was sitting beside you and you handed me your card. I think you're on my podcast.
Which is funny because sometimes like I'll have people that are like, I want to be on the show, but it's like I zero in and I'm like, this person has a story and everyone needs to hear their stories. So I'm so grateful that you're taking the time to be with me today.
No problem. This is gonna be fun.
Well, all right. So we're in season 2. And so we start right in the middle of the messy middle. So, Tanya, when was your moment that you just realized your feet were deep in the mud and you were facing it down and you're like, holy crap, I'm a workaholic and it isn't working anymore?
Mm. Oh gosh. I think there were a couple moments in my career, in my business for sure. But I would say that one was when we were on the show Dragon's Den, and that's like Shark Tank in the US. And Sammy, my third child, was just born. He was only 3 weeks old when we aired on this national show. And I was in extreme pain. I was deep into, depression, like postpartum depression, but there was nothing stopping me that I was going to just keep going. It didn't matter what I was feeling, what I was doing, how much time I was neglecting my son. I was just so determined that I was going to do all of the magazine interviews, the newspaper interviews. I was going to do a cross Canada tour. I was being asked to do so much after that aired because we were so successful on the show that I looking back, I should have said no to many of those engagements because I was so sick. I was just so sick. But I realized then, and with your show, I was a workaholic and I still am sort of like a workaholic, but it wasn't until 2018 when I had a complete mental breakdown that I realized that I needed help for sure. And I had to step back from my business, my family for 6 weeks. I went to a mental health hospital facility and really learned there how how little I was taking care of myself for the past 10 years. And that was not a place that I recommend anyone getting to, right? The warning signs were there the whole time, all through those years, but I just chose to ignore them because A, I just didn't want to stop working. And B, I was just too ashamed to admit that I needed help. It's
Mhm.
like,
So I'd love to I love what you said about the warning signs. I would love to dig into what that was and what was that, like you said, driving conversation or dialogue that was happening. And what did it feel like when those warning signs were starting to emerge? So what was some of those warning signs that were there, but in the moment you didn't see?
the warning signs were there all the way back to when I was 20. I can go back that far. I had a attempted suicide when I was 18, over something that was so trivial. So I went to see a therapist after that for maybe a month to unload some of maybe the trauma that I'd had while in my childhood. I'm an only child, divorced parents, alcoholic father. Brought up in a pretty not safe or stable home, and I think that really impacted me a lot in my later years, good and bad, good
Mhm.
and bad. But even at 20, I'm going to see a therapist for a few weeks. I was like, no, I'm good now. We're good. But I just always had I've always been such an anxious person, anxiety and stress and depression all through my 20s, but just not I just didn't know what to do about it. I just didn't know what to do about it. And I didn't want to go talk to anyone about it either. But even back then, like we're talking 20 years ago, mental health was still not something that people really talked about a lot, right?
Yeah.
I mean, really, I should have been probably committed to a hospital at that point where I tried to commit suicide, but nobody thought to do that. So, anyways, fast forward, now I'm married with children, and just all of the because of my history of depression and anxiety. My first baby was a miscarriage, but that led us to Nova Scotia, where I got the idea to start a company. And so, silver lining is that whole ordeal ended up with this business that I am in right now. So yeah, all of the signs of just, of anxiousness and depression, those were the signs. I could be happy as a lark and then so down that people would never even recognize who I am. Because this is how I usually am, right? I'm like that. I'm a very outgoing personality, and I'm really good at hiding it too.
Mhm. That's
I'm
that's
really
all those management pieces we have inside of us.
Yeah.
And to that end, talking about hiding it, what role did work play in
Yeah.
helping to keep it under control or at bay?
Oh, what so at work, I was a totally different person. I mean, it was really for me, it was hard when this company grew. So, I mean, when I first started this company, it was just me. And then it was a couple of, my mom and my aunt. And then, fast forward 10 years later, I have like 100 employees and, thousands of reps across North America who now looked at me as somebody to lead them. And I felt very uncomfortable with that role. And I had to learn a lot about what it took to be a leader. And I made a lot of mistakes along the way. And one of the mistakes I think that a lot of leaders have fallen into the trap, and I hope it's getting better now, is that we didn't lead authentically. I don't think, right? We didn't lead, letting our team know that we were struggling
Yeah.
because we saw that as a weakness. We saw that as oh my gosh, what are they going to think about me if I say that I'm really suffering today and I just need to take a break? Well, like that I just couldn't even have imagined doing that prior to me going into the hospital. But after I got out of the hospital, and nobody knew where I was. Um, which, I think back now, I'm thinking, where did they think I was? How did my must have come up with a really good story about where I was. But after I got out of the hospital, I was determined that I was not going to live behind this facade anymore. I was going to be very out there, open. The first thing I did was I told our team what happened, where I was, and a lot of them were shocked. And I also said that it was time for us to start supporting mental health and that we were going to change who we were going to support now going forward because we were doing juvenile diabetes for like 10 years. And I said, that's it. We're going to do mental health now. So we did Crisis Text Line and Kids Help Phone, are two charities of choice now that we donate a lot of money to every year. And that's been it. Now I live my life authentically, and I listen. I tell everybody now if I'm having a bad day, they know I'm having a bad day, and they feel comfortable now telling me that they're having a bad day. I've
Mhm.
had a lot of our team say, not a lot, a few of them come up to me and say, "I'm not having a great day today. Like, do you have any recommendations?" Obviously, I am not a psychiatrist doctor, but I'm like, these are the things that work for me. Just take a breather. It's okay. It's okay to not be okay. So yeah.
I love that. It is I definitely have noticed the shift in our society over the past 20 years in workplaces where it is more, yep, this is not my best day. And then the great thing is people don't have to read into it then. It's like, did I do something wrong?
Like,
Because if you're having a bad day, people feel the energy, no matter how good you are at hiding it. None
yeah,
of us can truly hide what's going on. It seeps out the cracks.
no, exactly. Absolutely. I'll never forget.
Mhm.
It's one of the worst things that I think I've ever done. And it was just I was having such a rough week. And I think this was close to like we were still in the throes of Dragon's Den and all of the publicity and stuff. And I can't remember what exactly happened, but I brought one of our team members into my office and I just lost it. And to the point where like I made this person cry.
Mhm.
And that's not like me at all. And I look back at that moment, I was so ashamed and I was so embarrassed and I'll never forget it. But what I should have done that day because I was on edge and I wasn't myself, I should have just left. I should have just gone home, but I didn't. And I learned a lot of big lessons from that moment. I've never done that again.
So when you think then about these on edge moments, I can feel the description. I've been there myself. As the more that you've embraced this, just the reality of what emotions can be like and show up like, how has that affected the number ratio of days that you spend on edge versus being able to just naturally be in your own skin?
Yeah. That's a great question. Since COVID, so we were open all through COVID. And but I decided that I was going to stay home and work out of my home office and not going to the office. And my husband Adam, who's a CEO, goes into the office every single day. And even when COVID's over and everyone started going back to the workplace, I don't go back there as much as I used to because I I just know myself. I love being surrounded by people, but I also recognize that I'm a bit of a disruptor too. Right? I walk into the office and it's like, and listen, that's okay once in a while, but I learned that about myself that I work better in a closed environment and on Zoom with people than I do being in the office.
Mhm.
And so I've been able to have a beautiful balance
Mhm.
between the two now. Whereas before I was in the office every day, 9 to 6, every single day. I didn't miss a day. But now I have this beautiful balance between going into the office once in a while and being here and getting a lot of work done on my own. So that's worked really well for me. And it's worked really well for them too.
Yeah, I'm also one of those. COVID was a blessing in disguise, I would say, because I work in that way for me, right? So COVID did a lot of things. Some of it very bad, some of it very good. It was a disruptor in and of itself, right? And everybody's experience of it was completely different. So it opened our eyes to people's different life circumstances. But for me specifically, I am similar to you. I do my best work when I'm alone or I'm away. And because I am such a disruptive force, it's small doses with me. It's kind of like way better. Like
I'm so
I can inspire and motivate, and then you can have space to recover.
I love that you just said that because sometimes I feel like, am I the only one who's like this? Like, am I the only one who recognizes that they're like this? Oh, good. I'm so happy. That makes
It's
me happy.
amazing that you recognize it. That's like being aware of like how we show up, and the ceilings and the basements is one term I heard once in regarding strengths. Like there's ceilings and there's basements to certain things. So how do you recognize both and then capitalize on the ceilings but not dip into the basements to the point where it affects other people?
Oh,
So good for you recognizing that. I think that's amazing.
and you.
Thank you. So you've talked a lot about this anxiety thing.
Mhm.
What are the warning signs that it's showing up for you, that it's tingling? I call it a tingling because that's what it feels like to me. It's there, and we have to understand how we're interacting with it. So what does that feel like to you, and how do you know?
Mhm. It's that pit in your stomach, right? Like I'm about to write a whole piece on medical anxiety. Right? Like when your doctors give you news that isn't necessarily the news that you were expecting, and how does that affect your life, right? Your anxiety goes through the roof. And sometimes I know with myself, I read into things, I overanalyze things to the point where I can make my anxiety even worse.
Mhm.
So what I do, and this is what I learned in at the hospital I stayed at. It's so funny. I show everybody this book because this is my book from the hospital. This is how much paperwork I had from the hospital. Like this
Mm.
literally was a course on
Mm,
me. And but in here, because my anxiety, I have an anxiety disorder. So
mm,
it's called generalized anxiety disorder, which I hate that term
mhm.
generalized. Feels like so general. But I have these exercises that I do. And the one is, when I have these very heavy thoughts, I need to write the heavy thought down and I need to start analyzing it. Is this a fact or is this fiction? Is this
Mhm,
something up in your head or is it actually happening? And more
mhm,
than likely it's your our brains, especially I think with people with anxiety disorders, our brains go crazy. They start making up these stories that are so fictional that it makes you sick, right? It makes your
mhm.
even worse. So that helps me a lot. But yeah, it's that sick feeling in my stomach. And when I get that feeling or the tingly feeling,
Mhm.
I know what you're talking about with that.
So one of the research does show that workaholics tend to have a higher rates of anxiety. So that is actually totally normal, and a lot of folks do. A lot of folks I talk to have it. I'm learning this, and a lot of us find out about our workaholism in not so pleasant ways because of it.
Mhm,
Um, and whether people call it anxiety or not, or recognize it for that, is a whole different thing, right? Because anxiety can mask itself, like you said, in so many different ways. It can mask itself as anger. It can mask itself as a lot of different things, and mine can do both as well. But thinking about how it relates to work. So, what relationship do you have with work, and how has some of this other underlying stuff shaped your relationship with work?
mm. So that's a good question. I I recognize over the last couple of years, even after I got out of the hospital, I still remained a bit of a workaholic, even though I had just gone through a horrible ordeal with my mental health. I was still just, I just wanted to work, work, work. I Because with for me, I feel like this immense responsibility to our team, to our pathologists across North America. Like, if I'm not the most successful for them, then they're not going to be successful, right? So that played a big role on me for the last few years. But then I came to the realization that that was killing me. That
Mhm.
that pressure on myself was bringing my mental health forward again, and that my was was back to where it was when I went into the hospital. So I realized that I can't I can't control other people's success anymore. Like it's not in my it's not I can't I can't create success for other people. And that's a lot of the guilt that I had to let go of, is that, I wanted to see people successful in our company, but I realized I can't be that person to make them successful. They have to do it themselves. So I started kind of like backing away a little bit from these from these relationships that I had with people within my company, and keeping it more, what's the word I want to say, impersonal, because it's always very personable, but I didn't feel like this absolute like drive or desire that I have to be the person to make them successful anymore.
Yeah.
And that's been a huge relief for me, a huge relief to let that go, because I've been holding on to that for 15 years of me being the sole responsible person for other people's success. And so letting go of that has really helped my relationship with work. I'm now I'm now more involved with my children's school life. I wasn't before. It wasn't up until this year that I decided that I was like, you know what? My kids are getting older. Like, my oldest is almost 16. My youngest is 11. I want to be more involved in their life at school. So I now have my calendar all, programmed on the for the, programmed, so the days that I need to spend time with them, they're blocked off. I don't have any meetings anymore. I'm not doing anything anymore unless it has purpose unless it has a big purpose within my life and my family. So, yeah.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
amazing. So it sounds like this has been a multi-step journey, but I want to go back to that quote that you said. It was super powerful. I cannot control or create other people's success.
No. Yeah. And that's a hard one. I don't know if this is hard for you too, but as an entrepreneur, especially because within my company, I offer this opportunity to become an entrepreneur, right? Micro entrepreneurs within my company. And nothing makes me happier than to see people be successful within this company. But when people aren't, I used to take that on so heavily. Oh my God, to the point where it would make me sick, because I wanted it so bad for themselves. But then I realized I can't want this for them. They have to want it for themselves. Right.
And we can't want something for someone more than they want it for themselves either. Even
Right.
if we choose to lean in and support it, it's non-productive to do it.
It's
And I
on.
would say that extends even beyond the workplace to parenting. I've had to learn that. My kids are 15 and 17 now. The 17-year-old especially, he's 1 year away from being a legal adult and, getting his first full-time job and all of that, and I definitely have had to learn that they don't become adults overnight. You have to pull back in pieces and understand that you actually aren't the sole contributor of their success in life, which was like a complete mind for me,
Yeah.
to realize that my arms only reach so far. That's
Yeah.
there's only so far they can reach.
Yeah, that's so funny. I had this same conversation with my husband last night because our daughter, Layla, she got a not so great score on her math test, on her math exam. And it was like a 73, but he wasn't happy with that because he expects her to get 90s. And I'm like, and so he was really hard on her. And I get it. I said, but how to like, at some point, we have to step back and let her understand the repercussions of her actions, right? Like, yeah, of course, I don't want to see her fail,
Mhm.
but we can't be hovering over her all this. Like, she has to learn too that this is her responsibility. She
Mhm.
better study for her test if she wants the pass because the repercussions of that are going to be on her life
Mhm.
and not ours. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So now comes the part where I get to try to recap your journey, and you can tell me how far off I am. But what I heard is that you have, throughout your life, recognized that you have a high degree of, like you said, anxiety. And I would just
Mhm.
say, oh, it's usually awareness, right? You have a high
Yeah.
degree of awareness as to what's going on around you, of nervousness. You had some of these perfectionist components and all these different components. And instead of recognizing and working through them as they've arisen in the past, actually, at some point up until your kind of break, you worked through them more as I worked through them, grabbing the keyboard, doing the marketing PR, just trying to silence the noise by showing up day in and day out over and over again consistently. And you wanted stability. And more than anything, you felt responsible for other
100%.
people's success. And that weight of that responsibility kept you moving forward, even when what would have been best was to stop.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect.
The signs that you talked about as like a pit in your stomach, or like you said, it could be that tingling or the shaking sense of anxiety and anger. It can be any of those things, but really, it sounds like recognizing the physical signs of how it's showing up and learning to stop and pause was also a critical part because you've had multiple things over the past
Mhm.
period of time. So being super aware of your own signs and how to read them and how to slow down and learn what your body's trying to teach you every time.
Yeah.
Taking the help you need when you need it, learning how to ask for it, learning how to
Mhm.
receive it, and then learning how to be authentic about where you are right now actually helps you become a better leader, not a worse one.
100%.
Knowing
Absolutely.
what you need and going after it, like, you know that you work better at home and your team works better when you're at home, so really understanding this is what I need to be a happy, healthy, well-rounded individual, and then ultimately stepping back and recognizing that only other people can create their success. All you can do is show up in a way that gives them the best environment to achieve that, but beyond that, it's really up to them.
Yes.
And here
How
you are. How'd I do, Tanya?
and you know what? I just want to reiterate the one thing that I think that I would want people to take away from this conversation is that it is okay to ask for help.
Mhm.
And I think that a lot of people are afraid of that. They're afraid to go and ask for help. There are lots of therapists out there now. I mean, I think they're everywhere. And some of them are free too. Like you can, if you really are seeking help, there are options out there for you. Talk to your doctor. I just think that there's still a lot of people who are sitting silently at home suffering and not talking to anyone. And that is what is going to get people into trouble.
Yeah,
I always say silence is a trap because it is a trap because I was silent for so many years and I almost, in 2018 almost ended my life because of it because I was too afraid to talk about it. So if there's one thing I can tell people is just go and talk to somebody about it.
I agree. For those of you out there, understanding why you struggle with asking for help is actually the first step. So, what is it about help? Have you had an experience in the past where you've built, like for me, I built my life off of doing it myself. So there's a pride component in it. There's also, are you afraid that people wouldn't be there for you if you ask and that you'd be let down and that would be shattering and further debilitate your ability to ask for help? Have you gotten into a pattern of doing it? Somebody does something for you, it's not quite done how you want it. Perfectionist in us tends to create that. And so then you go in and just do it yourself because it's easier. Have you
Mhm.
created that talk track? But whatever it is, like figure out what's holding you back and then channeling your community,
Thank you.
emphasizing that, Tanya, asking for help is so important and it's so difficult.
Yeah, it is.
Any final parting thoughts for us?
No, I just want to say thank you for having me on the podcast. It's such an important topic that I just feel so passionate about. Being an entrepreneur is not always it's not always a fun ride. It is an up and down roller coaster of a ride. And managing your stress and anxiety is just so important through the ups and the downs. So, yeah.
Thank you for so much for sharing your story, Tanya. And for those of you who want to check out her company, Sipology, it allows people to have this amazing micro entrepreneur experience. You guys have amazing tea. And I am so, so honored to have you on this show. Thank you, Tanya.